When Mark Wahlberg walked into the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, he wasn't there to pick a fight. He was there to promote his new film, shake a few hands, and maybe share a couple of funny stories. But live television is unpredictable, and tonight, under the studio lights, a simple joke was about to spark a moment no one would forget. Outside, Los Angeles buzzed as the audience filed into the studio. Laughter echoed as people found their seats, clutching coffee cups and glossy applause cards. Stage lights hung overhead, bathing the set in a warm glow. The desk shone, and behind it, Jimmy Kimmel cracked off-the-cuff jokes for the warm-up crowd, his signature smirk in place. Backstage, Mark Wahlberg adjusted his gray suit jacket as his stylist made final tweaks. The crisp white shirt underneath reflected his no-nonsense style. Mark had been through countless interviews, but Jimmy had a reputation: sharp, unpredictable, and not above stirring the pot for a laugh. 2 minutes. Mark, a stage hand called. Mark nodded, offering a small smile. His publicist whispered, "Keep it light. Talk about the movie, the family." He didn't need reminding. Mark knew the game. But neither he nor his team could have predicted that Jimmy would open with a topic outside the agreed list, one that touched a nerve Mark rarely exposed. The applause sign lit up as the show returned from commercial break. Jimmy leaned toward the camera, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Wahlberg." The crowd erupted. Mark walked out, waved, and shook Jimmy's hand before taking his seat. Jimmy started light. "Mark, you're looking good, man. Movie star good or still trying to prove I can beat up anyone in this room good?" Mark chuckled. "Bit of both, Jimmy. Gotta keep people guessing." The audience laughed. On the surface, everything seemed normal. To pros exchanging banter. But Jimmy's grin widened. "I've been reading about your new movie," he began. "But before we get into that, what's harder, acting in an intense action scene or explaining that Boston accent to people who think you're doing a bad British impression?" The crowd roared. Mark smiled politely, eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, Jimmy, explaining it to you might be the hardest job I've had." Laughter, but with an edge. Jimmy leaned forward. "Come on, man, I love you, but I read somewhere you almost became a priest. How do you go from holy water to Hollywood?" The audience giggled. Mark laughed lightly. The entertainment industry could use a little divine intervention. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. The audience hung on every word. The atmosphere shifted subtly, but unmistakably. In the first 5 minutes, the back and forth started slow, the kind of playful banter expected between two quick-witted pros. But somewhere between the laughs and jabs, Jimmy stopped playing for chuckles and started aiming for a viral moment. The first commercial break ended. Cameras rolled again, capturing Jimmy leaning casually on his desk, a mischievous spark in his eye. Mark sat opposite him, relaxed but subtly tense. Jimmy flipped through his cards as if unprepared. "This new movie of yours, Steel Horizon, right? Explosions, car chases, the usual Wahlberg package. But do you ever look at the script and think, wow, I've been playing the same guy for 20 years? The crowd chuckled. Mark's jaw tightened. "I like to think I bring something new to every role. Different layers, different energy. But hey, you've been making the same desk jokes for 20 years too." "Jimmy," the audience gasped, then laughed. Jimmy smirked. "Touché, but at least my jokes don't blow up half a city block. Yet." Mark shot back, deadpan. They laughed again. Jimmy leaned forward, elbows on the desk, voice dipping into the faux-friendly tone late-night hosts use before twisting the knife. "Speaking of your layers, Mark, you've had an interesting career crapper. Underwear model, action star, almost priest. Oh, and that little thing about your colorful past. Do you ever think about how crazy it is that Hollywood embraced you?" The air in the studio shifted. The crowd's laughter softened into a murmur. Mark didn't flinch, but his gaze locked on Jimmy like he'd just been called into the ring. "You mean, do I think about how much work I've put in to change my life every day?" Mark said slowly, his voice dropping. "And maybe you think it's a joke, but I take it seriously." Jimmy raised his eyebrows. feigning innocence. Hey, I'm just saying it's a redemption story. People love that. Mark's smile was tight. Yeah, but usually, they tell it without trying to make you the punchline. The audience went quiet. This wasn't the friendly banter they had come for. It was a stare down. The stage lights felt hotter, the hum of the cameras louder. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Jimmy shifted tactics. All right, he said, flipping to another card. Let's talk family. You've got 4 kids, right? How do they feel about dad running around on screen punching bad guys and blowing stuff up? Mark's face softened. They rolled their eyes mostly. To them, I'm just dad, not some action hero. My daughter still beats me at mini golf and doesn't let me forget it. The audience laughed, the tension easing. Jimmy smiled, but his eyes still held that glint of unfinished business. So, they don't think you're cool at all? Nope, Mark said. Not even close. Well, Jimmy replied with a grin, at least you've got the Boston accent to fall back on. Mark tilted his head. Here we go again. The crowd chuckled. Jimmy pressed his running gag further. Seriously, you could be giving the Gettysburg Address and half the country would think you're ordering a meatball sub. The laugh was loud. Too loud. Mark's smirk didn't reach his eyes. You know, Jimmy, he said slowly, I've worked with a lot of comedians. The good ones know when to stop. It was subtle, but the audience noticed. This wasn't scripted anymore. The rhythm was off. Jimmy sat back, crossing his arms. You telling me to stop, Mark? He asked, smiling, but not really smiling. I'm telling you I'm here to talk about my work, Mark replied. Not give you ammo for your next stand-up routine. For a moment, Jimmy seemed ready to change the subject, but then he leaned in again, breaking one of the oldest rules in show business. Don't poke a guest who's already bristled. So, speaking of your work, Jimmy said slowly, I read you turned down a certain superhero role, big paycheck, big franchise, the works. Ever regret that? Or was it one of those too much work, not enough ABS situations? The crowd oohed. Mark gave a short, hollow laugh. No regrets. I don't take roles I can't commit to? Pretty simple. Jimmy grinned. I hear you. I've turned down plenty of jobs, too, like I could have hosted The Tonight Show. But I remembered I like having my own show. Mark looked at him for a long moment. Yeah, and I like not needing to make a living off taking shots at people sitting right in front of me. The laughter this time was smaller, edgier. The audience sensed they were no longer watching 2 men having fun, they were watching 2 men circling each other. By the next commercial, the tension was thick enough to slice. Mark leaned back, arms crossed. Jimmy shuffled his cards, glancing at his producer with a half smile that said, This is getting good. The audience whispered among themselves, realizing they were halfway to witnessing one of the most uncomfortable interviews in Jimmy Kimmel's career. The jokes had stopped landing. The smiles had stopped being real. Between Jimmy's smirk and Mark's unblinking stare, it was clear this wasn't just an awkward moment, it was the start of a full-on clash. The second segment began like any other. Upbeat music, Jimmy's wave to the camera. But the tension from earlier hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had thickened, hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. Jimmy leaned in with that playful grin again. So, Mark, I heard you've been spending a lot of time back in Boston lately. Family, old friends, avoiding Los Angeles, or just hiding from your last box office flop. The crowd gasped audibly. It wasn't a gentle jab. It was a hard right hook. Mark chuckled low and deliberate. You know, Jim, the thing about Boston is people there tell you to your face when they don't like you. Not with a smile in a studio audience. Laughter rippled across the crowd, awkward and nervous, the kind that comes with glances toward the stage. Wondering if they were watching the moment everything fell apart, Jimmy shrugged theatrically. I'm just asking the questions people want to know. Mark's eyes narrowed. No, you're asking the questions you think will get you a trending clip. That landed. Jimmy's smirk faltered for a beat before returning. Well, you're welcome for the free publicity. Publicity is only good if you're not making yourself look like a clown in the process. Mark shot back. The audience oohed. The cameraman instinctively pushed in for a tighter shot. Somewhere off to the side, a producer's hand hovered over the signal to cut to commercial. But Jimmy wasn't backing down. He leaned forward on his desk, tone half mocking, half provocative. You know, Mark, you've always had this tough guy thing going on. But it's funny you're sitting here getting prickly over a few jokes. Makes me wonder if the tough guy is just for the camera. Mark didn't blink. You can wonder all you want, but there's a reason I don't need cue cards to say what I think. The jab about cue cards hit home. The audience erupted into scattered applause. Jimmy's expression tightened briefly, irritation slipping through before he masked it. Hey, Jimmy said, holding up his hands. I'm just doing my job, and I'm just doing mine. Mark replied, which, by the way, is not sitting here so you can run through your little list of recycled insults. The room seemed hotter. Jimmy shifted in his chair, weighing whether to push or pivot. He pushed. All right then, he said, smiling too wide. Tell me about this workout routine you've been posting on Instagram, the 4 a.m. wake-ups, the protein shakes, the punching bag. Is that discipline? Or are you just desperate to prove you've still got it? Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees, closing the gap. Jimmy, I've been getting up early and putting in the work since before you had this desk, and I'll still be doing it when someone else is sitting there. The crowd gasped. Jimmy's eyes flicked toward his crew. The moment wasn't lost. By now, the banner had crossed the point of no return. Every laugh from the audience was strained. Every silence felt heavier than the last. But Jimmy, sensing the viral potential, pressed on. So, if you're so committed to the work, why do people say you just play the same guy in every movie? Mark smiled faintly, not warm, but tight-lipped, sharpening a response. People say a lot of things. Some say late-night hosts have been doing the same monologue for 15 years. Doesn't make it true? Gasps, laughs, and even a few cheers followed. Jimmy's smile remained, but his posture stiffened. I see, he said, tapping his cue cards. So now you're the comedian? No, Mark replied, calm but cutting. I'm just not afraid to call it like I see it. The pause was long enough to make even seasoned camera operators shift in their seats. This wasn't banner anymore. This was personal. The producers knew they had a problem, but also television gold. As the segment dragged toward the next break, Jimmy forced a laugh, returning to the movie, but the tension lingered. Mark answered curtly. The warmth was gone. When the cameras cut, Jimmy leaned back, muttering under his breath. Mark tilted his head, eyes narrowing. He didn't respond. Damn, not yet. The final segment was coming, and both men seemed to know it. That's where the explosion would happen. For 40 minutes, the tension had simmered just beneath the surface. Now it was about to boil over. When it did, the audience, crew, and Jimmy Kimmel himself would be left stunned, witnessing one of the most uncomfortable live exits in late-night history. The final segment began with a forced smile from Jimmy, the kind you put on when determined to finish a dinner you wish you'd left an hour ago. Well, he said, tapping his cue cards, before we wrap up, let's talk about your new movie. I mean, it's not like you came here to just insult your host. Laughter, nervous, spread through the crowd. Uneven laughter came from the audience. Mark sat still, leaning slightly forward, hands loosely clasped in front of him. I came here, he said, to talk about the work. But it's hard to do that when you keep steering it toward your comedy roast. Jimmy tilted his head, feigning innocence. Hey, my job's to keep things interesting. Mark's brow furrowed, his voice calm but heavier. There's interesting, and then there's disrespectful. You've been walking that line all night, and you know it, the audience murmured, sensing the tension. This wasn't playful anymore. It was confrontation. Jimmy's eyes darted to the cameras, then back to Mark. Oh, come on. You're a tough guy, right? You can take a few shots. Mark leaned back, then forward again, elbows planted on the desk. I can take a lot, Jimmy. I've taken worse from people who actually mattered in my life. But I don't confuse taking shots with letting someone waste my time. Gasps rippled through the studio. Jimmy's jaw tightened. The banner had turned into a standoff, no escape without someone backing down. "All right," Jimmy said, flipping through his cards. "Since we're so pressed for time, I'll make this quick. A lot of people think you're too serious. Ever wonder if maybe that's why people enjoy ribbing you? Because you can't laugh at yourself?" Mark didn't blink. "I laugh plenty, just not at cheap shots disguised as jokes." Jimmy exhaled sharply, leaning back. "Maybe you should stick to punching people in movies. You seem better at that." Mark smiled faintly, more intimidating than anger. "Maybe you should stick to interviewing people you can talk over." The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in applause. Jimmy's smile vanished. He set his cards down, clasped his hands, and said, "You know what? If you're that unhappy being here." Mark stood. The studio froze. Camera operators scrambled as he rose, smoothing his jacket and giving one last glance to the audience. "Thank you for coming out tonight, folks. Sorry you didn't get the show you expected." The audience roared, some cheering, some booing, all on their feet. Jimmy stayed seated, eyes fixed on Mark, jaw clenched so tightly his facial muscles twitched. As Mark walked off stage, a few audience members reached for high fives. He obliged without breaking stride, heading straight for the backstage curtain. Jimmy turned back to the camera, forcing a smirk. "Well, Mark Wahlberg." Everybody. The applause was half-hearted. Even the band's exit riff felt awkward, cutting off after a few seconds. The moment wasn't just television, it was history in the making. In the control room, producers buzzed, knowing they'd have to do damage control with Mark's team. Another voice cut through. "Do not cut that. That's going viral." And they were right. By morning, the clip would be everywhere. Headlines, talk radio, trending hashtags. "Mark Wahlberg walks out on Jimmy Kimmel" would dominate feeds, and everyone would have an opinion on who crossed the line. For those in the studio that night, one thing was certain: the laughter had stopped long before the exit. And when it ended with a finality that left no room for second chances. If you watch live, you already know this wasn't just a celebrity spat, it was a collision between two personalities who weren't going to give an inch. The real question: who was in the right? Was Mark justified in walking out, or should he have stayed and finished the interview? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this one's going to divide people. And if you enjoy behind-the-scenes breakdowns of the most explosive talk show moments, like this video, subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you think this was tense, you haven't seen what's coming next.